Hey guys, Scott here. Today I just want to talk for a little bit about killer powers and how they're just sort of getting homogenized into being basically the same thing every time. And whether or not that's a fault of the game or just the developers not having unique ideas or things like that. But for pretty much the past 2 years, almost every killer, not everyone, but almost every single killer we've gotten is some form of low to medium range anti loop, but not very strong map control killer, and the counterplay to almost all these killers is to just hold W because that's really all you can do to not have to play into like, a Nemesis 50-50 at a pallet or a Pyramid Head 50-50 at a pallet. It's what you do to not eventually go down to Trickster. You have to just sort of keep making distance while looking behind you and putting stuff in the way. Basically, all these designs boil down to the correct counterplay being just to hold forward. And I find that, and I think most people find that very uninteresting. It's not a matter of strength. We're not talking about how strong or weak the killers are. It's just a matter of how interestingly they are designed. And it's been, at least the past couple of years, a whole mess of just not very interesting design at all. And I wanted to go into whether or not, do you guys think that's because they're just simply out of ideas? Or a possible option is that there's just too much simplicity in Dead by Daylight to have more unique ideas. I mean, like, there's basically just pallets, windows, and hiding. That's basically it. That the entire game just boils down to those three facets over and over and over again. So it's kind of justifiable, I think, to start running out of ideas because they're working with rock, paper, scissors, basically. There's only so many mods you can add to that type of game to make it more interesting. And I think that's where we're at now. We're 5 years deep into this game, and the core gameplay has not changed one iota. It's the exact same thing. And while this is great, DBD simplicity is its greatest strength and its greatest weakness, I think. It's amazing for new players because they can get into a game, understand how to play it within 20 minutes. Whereas a game like VHS is a bit more daunting for new players, but it might have the side effect of actually being more balanced because even though there's more stuff to learn, the stuff that you do learn is more balanced. But like I said, it's probably why DBD still exists because it is so simple and easy to get into. And obviously, the licenses do a lot to help it as well. But that's, one of the things that helps it a lot. But when you have a game that's really just this simple, it's kind of hard to keep coming up with powers that deal with one of the two mechanics in the game survivors have to basically hide or get away or flee. So I almost want to give the developers a bit of slack because their game is just too simple to really have unique ideas. But I'm not going to do that because there are still pretty cool ideas that you can add. It just takes a bit more thinking, and they've touched on it a couple of times. For example, what are like the hallmarks of a well-designed killer? Well, they will have some form of speed, so they can counter people just holding W. They will have some form of anti-loop, but the anti-loop is usually somewhat fair in the sense that usually it's just the better player or the smarter player will come out on top. And that's why I always bring up Blight as an example of a well-designed killer. So they've done that before, but you can do that in the opposite direction. I think Pig is a really good example of having that map control feature without speeding the killer up because it instead uses the survivor slower's movement speed against them because they have to go and do things. That kind of side objective, I think, is a pretty good idea. But the problem is Pig has nothing in the chase department. So she's got that interesting kind of 1v4 aspect that almost all killers do not have. But in the chase aspect, she basically has nothing. The dash is very situationally useful. So they've touched upon other possible ideas than just giving killer X movement speed boost and then having some form of like kind of low anti-loop ability. But they have not really expanded on that really ever. So I still think there's a lot of interesting avenues left for killer designs. I've always wanted to see a physics-based killer that basically acts sort of like a like Timbersaw from Dota, if you've ever played. Basically, you'd have like a grappling hook, and you could launch onto the side of a TL wall and use it as a fulcrum and whip yourself around and try to hit the survivor. It'd be sort of like a combination of a Blight and Hillbilly, like that kind of play style. That would have map control. It would have very high potential for high skill plays, potential to be countered. Like, there are still things you can do like that, but I think they're scared to do especially physics-based things like that because although the engine can support it, they're using Unreal Engine. That is considerably harder to code, and that's probably why they stayed away from physics-based things like that. So I don't know. There are still things they can do, but even if we add, cool suggestions like that, it's just putting band-aids on an infected wound, right? So you add more and you dilute the number a bit more, but there's still going to be a bunch of killers that have the exact same issue. So it's almost like a more systemic change has to happen, but we're so far deep into this now. It's like, how do you even do that at this point? They're too slow at updating things, so that systemic change will probably never really happen. So the most we can really ask for is just simply having more killers that have signs of it being well designed, more than just, the simple not great at 1v4, but it's got really strong anti-loop. So the only option survivors have is run forward, and everyone's just bored. So that's probably why no one even plays the artist anymore already. And people are just sick of the exact same formula on every single killer that comes out. So what's the beta or best way to fix it? I don't know. It could be a systemic change. It could just be simply adding a bunch more unique changes, or unique killers rather, but I'm not sure the best way to do it. Curious to hear what you guys thought on that. That's it. Thanks for watching. Merry Christmas, by the way.